Welcome, everybody. Ready to dive into a text that's practically philosophy royalty, the Bhagavad Gita, specifically Chapter 3. We're talking action and desire, always a hot topic.
It's like we're tuning into a conversation that's been going on for ages, but honestly, it's kind of shocking how relevant it still feels today.
Right. It's like everyone's feeling this pressure to do more, be more these days. And here we have this ancient text that's basically a guidebook for navigating all of that.
And it jumps right in, doesn't it? I mean, we've got Arjuna, our main man, facing a real crisis. Knowledge or action, which path should he choose?
Talk about a dilemma. It's like the Gita starts by putting a name to a feeling we've all had at some point. So what wisdom does the Gita offer? What are we supposed to do?
Well, through Krishna, it gives us not one, but two paths we can take. Jnana Yoga, that's the path of knowledge, and Karma Yoga, which is the path of action. But the really interesting part, they both lead to that same goal of self-realization.
So it's not like we have to choose one or the other. That's good to hear, honestly. Although then there's that whole thing about actionlessness, which seems a little contradictory, right? Especially in a chapter that's all about action.
Yeah, I can see why that would be a head-scratcher at first, but it's not about just like sitting around doing nothing. What the Gita's getting at is this idea of mental stillness, being free from those desires and anxieties that tend to drive everything we do.
So even if I'm physically still, like if my mind's going a mile a minute, that's not it.
No, not quite. There's this great image in the Bhagavad Gita. It talks about how even when we seem inactive on the outside, our minds can be like a churning ocean. Finding true stillness, real actionlessness, means reaching a place where those thoughts settle down, inner peace.
So it's less about doing nothing and more about quieting that inner voice that never seems to shut up.
I like it.
But how does this actionlessness work if we're also trying to follow a path of action?
Okay, so think about like an archer aiming for a bullseye. The steadier their hand is, the less shaky they are, the better their shot is going to be. It's the same idea here. Mental stillness, maybe through something like meditation, helps us be more present, more intentional in everything we do.
So instead of just reacting to everything, we're acting with awareness. I'm with you. But the Gita doesn't stop there, does it? There's that whole concept of swadharma too, acting according to our true nature.
Right. And this is where the Gita gets super practical. It basically says that trying to force ourselves into roles that don't fit who we are, deep down what it calls paradharma, can make us feel dissatisfied, like truly unhappy. The Gita even says that trying to do someone else's duty, even if you're really good at it, will ultimately cause harm.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like trying to squeeze into a pair of shoes that are the wrong size. Uncomfortable and kind of pointless. So how are we supposed to figure out what our own swadharma is?
That's the journey, right? The Gita encourages us to pay attention to what we're naturally drawn to. What are those things that make us feel alive, energized, happy even? Those are the clues we should be paying attention to.
It's like we need to listen to our own internal compass instead of blindly following someone else's directions. Honor those unique gifts we have. But being real, in a world that tells us what we should be doing all the time, that's a lot easier said than done. It really is. It's like trying to dance to our own tune when everyone else is trying to make us follow their beat. But even if we do find our swadharma, like you were saying, that's only part of it, right? The Gita also talks about the why behind what we do, the motivation behind the action. And that's where we get to this idea of yajna, which usually gets translated as sacrifice.
Right, but thinking about it just as sacrifice doesn't really get at what the Gita is trying to tell us about yajna. It's bigger than that. It's more about dedicating the things we do to something bigger than just ourselves.
So instead of just thinking about what we're getting out of it, it's about how we're contributing to something bigger.
Exactly. Think about it approaching work, like solely for the paycheck, versus seeing how your work actually benefits other people, your team, your community, even the world. It's a totally different way of seeing things.
Wow. When you put it like that, it totally changes how even ordinary things feel. Instead of just checking things off a list, it's like we're part of something much bigger. It's like the Gita's telling us to find the meaning that's hidden in plain sight. But let's be real, it's not always easy. Especially when we get to what the Gita calls our biggest obstacle, desire.
Yeah, that's a big one. The Gita's thoughts on desire are definitely up there with its most powerful teachings, and maybe the most challenging ones, too. Because let's be honest, we live in a world that's always telling us to want more, buy more, be more, and the Gita comes along and says, nope, desire is the real enemy here.
It does kind of feel like it goes against everything we're told, right? We're hardwired to want things, to have goals. So how can desire be a bad thing?
Well, the Gita isn't saying that all desire is automatically bad, but it's showing us how, if we let it, Desire can lead us down a path of always wanting more and never being satisfied. Think about it, when we're always chasing after that next thing, we never really stop to appreciate what we already have. We just end up stuck in this endless loop of wanting.
It's like that whole grass is always greener thing. It doesn't matter what we have. We always seem to be looking at what we don't have and wanting that instead. So if desire is the enemy, like the Gita says, how are we supposed to deal with it? We can't just magically switch it off and become robots, right? It's a real struggle. How do you win a game when your opponent is like your own brain? So if we can't just erase desire, what are we supposed to do?
Well, the good news is the Gita gives us a plan. Remember that whole hierarchy thing we talked about earlier? Senses, mind, intellect, and then the true self. The Gita basically says we need to work our way up that ladder.
Mm.
Our true self is way beyond all those fleeting desires.
So we can use our intellect, our better judgment, to sort of take a step back and not get totally carried away by every little thing we want.
Exactly. It's about finding that place within us that can observe our desires without letting them completely take over. And the Gita actually uses a really powerful metaphor for this. It talks about a fire that's completely hidden by smoke. Our desires are like that smoke, blocking out the light and the warmth of our true knowledge, our inner wisdom.
Wow, I like that. So how do we get rid of the smoke, metaphorically speaking? How do we tap into that deeper wisdom?
Well, the Gita really emphasizes things like meditation. It's about quieting the mind, even if it's just for a few minutes, to make room for that inner observer to show up. And this isn't about becoming some kind of meditation master overnight. It's about looking for those little moments in our day to just be present, to really pay attention to our thoughts and emotions without judging them.
So, like, even if it's just taking a few deep breaths before responding to a stressful email, that could be a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. It's about bringing that awareness into everyday life. The more we can do that, the less those impulsive desires can control us.
So we're not ignoring our desires, but we're choosing how we respond to them.
Exactly. And this brings us to the real heart of what the Gita is trying to tell us about action. It's not about just giving up on the world or sitting on the sidelines watching things happen. It's about changing how we relate to action itself.
So acting with real intention.
Yes. And get this. The Gita says that even the wisest people still benefit from taking action. The key is not to try and avoid action altogether, but to make sure our actions are coming from a place of purpose and awareness. And here's where it gets really cool. The Gita actually suggests we can transform our actions into offerings.
Offerings, like a yajna. Dedicating our actions to something bigger than ourselves.
That's it. When we start to approach everything we do, our work, our relationships, even the little mundane things with that mindset of offering, of selfless service, it totally changes our perspective. Our actions become a way to connect with something way bigger than just our own little desires.
It's like our whole lives become a moving meditation, finding meaning and purpose in every single moment.
I love that. And that's really what the Bhagavad Gita is inviting us to do, to see life as a journey of self-discovery, to cultivate inner peace in the middle of all the action, and to find true fulfillment, not in those fleeting desires, but in the timeless wisdom that's already within us.
Wow, so powerful. Honestly, I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this amazing text. Thanks so much for guiding us through it. It's been a pleasure. And remember, the journey isn't over. It's up to us to take these insights and weave them into our own lives.
So true. And on that note, here's a question to ponder, straight from the Gita. If even the wisest people still benefit from taking action, can we learn to see action not as a source of stress, but as a way to grow and learn more about ourselves? Until next time, keep exploring. Keep diving deeper into that limitless wisdom that's within each of us.